Okay, amazing. So we are going to kick off. Thank you, everyone, for coming to the A16Z offices for a very special event. I don't think I've actually interviewed you before. Have I? Is this?
No.
I think this is the first time. Yeah. So even though I'm pretty sure I've been on the board for 6 years.
Yep.
So okay, first time for everything. This is amazing. All right. And I thought maybe it would be fun to maybe do two things. So one is just say a little bit about Tech Week, since this is all part of the whole Tech Week thing. So we have a couple Tech Week folks at A16Z here. We have Shrikala back there. Where's Rose? Rose is right there. Okay, Katya is floating around somewhere. So it's been wonderful to put together all the events. It's been SF in LA, 1,100 people, 1,100 events and something like 50,000 people, which has been fantastic. And so this is the first time we're doing this kind of a thing with the Substack folks. I wanted to say one really funny thing, which was how I originally met the Substack team, which was I have been writing a blog now for like almost 15 years. And when these guys were going through Y Combinator, Hamish actually reached out to me. So this is Chris's Kiwi co-founder. And he said, can I meet up with you? I was like, great, let's do it. I always love meeting founders. And then he gave me a pitch to move my blog over to Substack. And I was like, no fucking way. Never gonna do it.
You don't know how much money you could have made if you would have done that.
Yes. Well, no, that's actually very much true. I actually very much regret this. And so don't be like me. Instead, be like all the other smart people. And so what ended up happening was I said no. And but then years later, I started to see, of course, Substack all over the place on X and so on. And then I approached Chris and Hamish and Jay, and I was like, hey, I have a new job now. I can like give people money. It's a really cool superpower. Would you like some money? And Chris says, no fucking way. And it actually, like, I think it took like maybe 6 months for us to like wine and dine this guy enough that he finally would allow us.
It was time to build. What can I say?
Anyway, so yeah, so that is the backstory of how we met. Eventually we did convince Chris, which is great. And then now my blog actually does run on Substack, and it's wonderful. And I wish I had migrated earlier. And I also, I think many folks in the audience maybe also are readers of Lenny Rachitsky's blog. Is that true? Also on Substack? Okay, amazing. I convinced Lenny to come to Substack, and I am his first paid subscriber. You can check that in the database. And that's been great for everyone too. So anyway, I know we're all very grateful for Substack existing. And so, Chris, my first question to you is, you are CEO of Substack, but actually you had this whole other life before this where you were an engineer, and you also actually, I actually feel like people almost don't know that you built a multi-100 million user product before all of this, but as CTO. So tell us a little bit about like being in Canada, doing the Canada thing, like, starting a company in Canada, all of that. And like, you're now here, of course, but like, tell us about the whole journey.
Yeah. Well, I went to University of Waterloo for college. We did the co-op internship program where you kind of have 6 real jobs when you go to school, which is nice because then you can afford to go to school and you do real things. I got kind of like a taste for building, and I was sort of bored at like the fake learning thing, and always really liked the like really making something thing. And I got into the Kik thing kind of by accident. I was just hanging out with Ted Livingston, who was the CEO, and we were just tinkering. We were just building some stuff. We weren't really sure exactly what we were making at the start. We started out building a music player for the BlackBerry, and
very Canadian
story. And, yada, yada, yada. We ended up building a messenger that had an absolutely wild arc. I learned a lot. It was, it's funny, I think, being sometimes the technical co-founder, you experience things in like a weird opposite land. Like we went through a period where we were doubling our user base every 4 or 5 months for like several years. And the way that I experienced that at the time was like, oh, this hurts and I'm not getting to sleep at all. And we're all dying and we're 23 and we have no idea how to like scale a service like this. And we're flying servers around because we didn't know to use AWS because we're idiots. And it was a bazillion years ago. And of course, now I'm like, oh man, that's the luckiest thing we ever could have had happen to us. But at the time I was like, this sucks. I don't get to sleep. Like, we're working hard.
And when you started, you were actually coding, and like how did the job like evolve and change, and how did you kind of stay involved, like close to the metal or not, or become a manager? Like tell us about kind of your sort of technical journey there.
Well, so at Kik, I started out just writing the code, ended up building the engineering team as we grew, and then gravitated towards kind of like the product end of the world, because for me, I realized, the impact of the things that we build on people is the part of the challenge that motivates me. I do get into the tech, I do get into all of the pieces of it, but I sort of like point my hacker mind at like the humans that end up using the thing. And that's where like the fascinating problems wind up being, and then being able to bridge that into the physical realities of what do we have to build? How can we make this thing real? And even at Substack, I'm the CEO this time, which is a very different story, but I built all the early code. Jay and I were the only people writing, that wrote the vast majority of the product for the first several years. When we finally relented and did that Series A, it was just the three of us working out of my apartment, and it was Jay and I that built everything.
And I think some people have that choice where something they want to go down the like, distinguished engineer path, like kind of like the super IC, like really deep, versus kind of the thing where you kind of fork and you're going more engineering manager and leader, and then of course a CEO. How did you know which one was right for you? And obviously, Jay is like a genius, right? And so you obviously ended up with a very strong technical co-founder that you met, at Kik originally.
Yeah, no, I'm like, I need somebody who's a way better engineer than me this time around. That would be really good. I never really even thought about it too much as like the management track versus the IC track. I think when you're a founder, you tend to really blur those things, and you wind up having to do both in order to do a good job. I mean, the way that I think about it is, it's like a cliche in our industry, but it's deeply true, is you have to start with the user, start with the product, start with the thing that matters in the world, and be willing to work backwards to everything else. Work backwards to what should our stack be? How should our servers be architected? And also like, what should our org structure be? And how should we hire? And what should our business model be? And ultimately, when you're building a company, it is kind of sort of a challenging, fun engineering problem if you look at it the right way. So I think weirdly, maybe the founder path is a way to kind of do both of those things in a pretty unique way.
Right. And maybe before we transition, you can kind of tell us about what kind of peak Kik look like. And so by the way, for some of the folks that maybe haven't used the product, it's sort of messaging app, more username focused. It was very young. And then maybe you can talk a little about the scale. What did it look like? The number of people, how much money did you guys just say a little bit about kind of like peak Kik? What did that look like before you moved on?
Yeah, we were sort of like WhatsApp before WhatsApp blew up for a minute there. We were growing very fast. They were unknown. And then BlackBerry sued us and tried to kill us and almost succeeded. And then we built it back up from nothing. And in that second phase, I think probably the most interesting part, there was at one point we were like 40% of US teenagers were using Kik. We raised money at $1 billion valuation from Tencent. And we were sort of like, felt like we had the world was our oyster, except we didn't know how to make money.
Yes. And then I think you guys had like, hundreds of millions of active users,
hundreds of millions of users,
all this stuff. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
It was big.
No, really, really impressive foray. And then I think you were in your 20s when you built it, right? This is like truly like out of college. This is one of these like, really, really rare, interesting experiences.
Yeah. I started building it in college instead of going to class.
Yeah, so that is the way to do it. That is, I will recommend that to everyone I know. So after Kik, you had kind of the messaging app wars, et cetera, and then eventually, I think there was like you decided to move on, and Talk about kind of the early days of like, okay, you're going to start a new company. You want to do a bunch of things differently. Like what, and there's a saying that you're always fighting your past, the last battle, you're always fighting the last war. And so the things that you kind of learn in your previous thing, you want to do differently. And like, what were some of the lessons you took out of Kick, and like, how did that inform how you picked the Substack idea in the first place?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of positive stuff I took from Kick. Even I think having been somewhere where we built something that had that kind of traction made me sort of believe that it was possible and understand like what kind of pieces have to come together for something like that to happen, and understand the impact that you can have when you make one of these online systems that everybody's spending their life in. Like I gained a big respect at Kick, both for human nature, like the people using your software at scale are going to do all kinds of strange things and be all kinds of like, you can't change who they are too much, and you shouldn't try. But nonetheless, when you're designing the systems that people are spending their lives in online, you can kind of make a heaven or a hell out of the exact same people. And so the way you set up the rules, the way you set up the incentives, the way you set up the norms, the way the system works, I guess I became a believer in the kind of social technology that we're building at Substack at all, which I think was a big part of what probably spurred me to do it ultimately. We did do a bunch of things differently. We at Kick, we stayed in Canada. We were fiercely proud. We were like, we're outside of the echo chamber, and engineers are so cheap to hire, and we're secretly geniuses for building this thing in a remote outpost. And I always wondered, I always sort of had a thing in the back of my mind that was like, would it have been different if we'd come to the Valley and like done that thing? And we did do that differently with Substack, and I'm glad we did. We also had a business model in mind, a way to make money.
What?
This is part of why we were always saying no to the money, is like we had a way to make money, which was nice.
It's very inconvenient for us.
I recommend it. It gives you a lot of leverage whenever you need it. And what else? Yeah, I don't know. We built the thing fast.
If many of you guys know there's in HBO Silicon Valley, there's the Russ Hanneman thing about how it's so great to be the no revenue company, because then if you have the no revenue company, then, there's no multiples, there's nothing, right. It's just the dream, right? And there's sort of an advantage of that.
You guys probably saw that and we're like, I hope everybody believes this shit.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's funny. I mean, I was recently just making the argument that we're now in an era where you're not going to be able to build a billion active user ad supported thing. That's sort of like something that's an idea from like 15 years ago, right? And instead, because we're in a much more competitive environment, there's a lot more going on. Much easier to think about how do you build and monetize something that's very valuable, that's like 100 million user environment. And I often ask founders now, hey, if someone wants to spend $5,000, how do they do that in your product, right? Because it's almost like the deeper the monetization, the better. And and I know with Substack, there are certain people that spend a lot of money. I don't know, I forget what the order of magnitude is, but a lot of money. Certain people that we both know also, in particular, spend a lot of money. Some Substack fans in our mutual group. And so I think that ends up being like one of the really interesting parts of getting going. And then tell us about kind of day one of Substack. Like, how did you? I know. I mean, there were a couple really interesting things I remember. I mean, I remember one was, I think you had like Bill Bishop, who's quite a famous writer, and he was involved quite early. I think he was like one of the seed investors, and he was making good money on Substack from the early days. As you were saying, you guys were building the product by yourselves, which is fantastic, like a really small group. And when you went through YC, it was like just 3 people. Just talk a little bit about like help us imagine what kind of year one was like.
Yeah, well, I'll give you the potted founding story, which was I wasn't actually planning to build a company yet. I was taking a year off. I planned to give myself basically a sabbatical. I'd been grinding pretty hard at the last startup. I wanted to like live my life and pursue my hobbies. And I'd always been an avid reader. I grew up in a house full of books, and I've always thought that what you read, the media you consume, shapes how you think, shapes how you see the world, sort of shapes who you are. And so great writing and great culture is valuable. The same way that you might write a piece of software and change how 1 million people do their jobs, you could write a great essay and change who 1 million people are. And that thing is like this inherently valuable, wonderful thing. And my answer to that was, I should be a writer. I should start writing. I should start vlogging. Like, cool. This is going to be one of my things that I do in this sabbatical that I take. And I wrote what was going to be an essay or a blog post or a screed or something, kind of like, at the time I was like outlining my frustrations with the media economy on the internet. I was kind of like, wow, you know, the internet's killed the business model for traditional media, and maybe social media is not, you know, an unalloyed good, et cetera, et cetera. And I sent it to my friend Hamish, who's really a writer, who became my co-founder. And he let me down very gently. He was like,
and Hamish, by the way, he's like a published author.
He's a published author.
Wrote a book on Tesla.
He's a journalist.
Yeah, exactly.
He worked at Tesla. He has like worked for a lot of the top publications in the world. And he was like, dude, it's 2017. And your point here is maybe newspapers are in trouble. And maybe like, you know, social media is a mixed blessing sometimes. Like, we know this is not the brilliant new idea that you think it is. However, a more interesting version of this thing might be, so what? Like, what could you, let's say that all of these things you're whining about in this dumb essay you're writing are true. What would you even do differently? And we started arguing about that. And that's the thing that became the kernel of the idea for Substack. And as we talked it over, we realized that it was simultaneously like a very ridiculously ambitious, grandiose idea. Like maybe we could reinvent the business model for culture on the internet and create an entire new economy of writing and media and video and things based on the idea that people would pay for things they value that could cause all these new things to exist, blah, 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 blah. And also there was this very simple MVP core of it that was like the very first instantiation of that idea that was basically like paid email newsletters. And that thing was the very simplest version of this very large idea. But that thing was like, I was like, you know, I bet you I could build that in like a weekend. And he was like, I know this guy, Bill Bishop. I know a couple of people, like a couple of my friends would probably like use that tomorrow if only it existed. So we had this like small group of people initially for whom the simple thing that we could build was like the cure for cancer. And of course I couldn't build in a weekend out that, you know, you're always a little bit optimistic. It took me a few weeks, but we built an early version of it. We actually started out, the very first act we did was publishing a manifesto. I don't recommend this, but we like on this little CMS that I was hacking together, we like wrote our founding document of like what we were doing and why. And I think Hamish sent that to Bill and a couple of other people. And it kind of like hooked us up with our first customer, who was someone who had been writing a email newsletter for years for like a big international business and government audience. And, you know, had been wanting to charge money for it, but couldn't figure, he was like the perfect early customer. And we launched with him in October 2017 and it instantly worked. He made $100,000 his first day. And I was just sitting there being like, is this good?
By the way, startups always work like this. It turns out this is you build something in a weekend, you make $100K in the first day.
You know what it is though? You know how if you ever talk about professional gamblers, every professional gambler has a story where at the start of their career they go on this huge winning tear. And the reason this is true, obviously, is because everybody who starts their career as a professional gambler on a losing tear does not go on to become a professional gambler. And so we did this thing where we're like, I wonder if this crazy thing we're working on is going to go anywhere. And our first customer, we got super lucky, in addition to being very smart and hardworking. And it really worked. And we were like, oh shit, we're doing this. And we like got into YC. And I remember very clearly in the YC interview. So first of all, when we applied, we put on the form, we have $0 in revenue. And then we interviewed like 4 days later and they were like, it says you have $0 in revenue. And I got to say, oh, actually there's been an update in the past 4 days. there's been $100,000 and that seemed very good. And I remember the thing that they said to us, they were like, oh, this is going to be easy. Like if you just get 4 or 5 more customers like this, you're going to like raise your demo day money. The whole thing's going to go. Like, you're off to the races. We're like, great. This is going to be like smooth sailing from here on out. It took us like 3 years before we ever got another customer that was that good. They were the best customer. They were the biggest customer and the fastest launching customer for so long. And there was such a long time where that was like, that early win kind of like overshadowed everything else we did. And we were gradually like, oh my God, did we make a terrible mistake building this thing? Is it going to work? But that initial success, I think, gave us enough energy, momentum to keep going. And of course, eventually it turns out there's lots and lots of people who go on to make millions of dollars on Substack, and that thing has really worked. But if we didn't both, I think, find the right hole in the universe and then get a little bit lucky, I don't know if we would have done the thing.
Yeah. And do you think that, like, I mean, one thing that was so fascinating in the early days was your choice of technology platform, because this was way after the mobile first thing. And I remember when we first chatted, I was like, okay, it's like a website and email list. I'm like, and you didn't do mobile. And then, by the way, this guy was like so against like all the like algorithmic anything. This was almost like a Luddite like startup.
Yeah. You know what's a sexy technology to work on? Email.
Yes, exactly.
This is like the one place where like the horrible legacy of like IE6 awful browser shit that we all had to leave in the past. Email, it's still alive and well. Every awful thing about old school web development, you still get to wrestle with it in email.
So, and so maybe two things on this is like, why pick from a tech standpoint something that was, where you started? That's kind of one. And then in the early days, as you're hiring and building out your engineering team, how do you get people excited about the mission and everything when there's always maybe folks come in and they're like, okay, well, what's the technology problem in this? And like, and tell us maybe how the engineering vision has evolved over time as well.
Yeah. Technology is a means to an end. And, the thing that was so cool about email to us was this is one of the last places on the internet, and especially on your phone, where you can have a direct connection with your audience without having to install an app. And it's not mediated by one of the big social algorithms. Yes, there's like a Gmail priority inbox algorithm, but email was sort of like this really fun hack where early on you could be a writer and have a direct connection with your audience in a way that was already like mobile, what did actually work on the phone. And it didn't require that you install a new app, because in the early days of Substack, nobody was ever going to install an app, right? If you have one newsletter you're subscribing to and it's like, get this app to get it, it's like, that's never going to work. So we knew that we needed, especially early on, to have a growth loop that didn't require putting an app in that thing. We wanted it to be just as easy as possible. We wanted it to be like, hey, you want this thing? What's your email? Cool. Do you want to pay for it? Give some money. Great, you're done. And so we built that. And this is like working backwards from the customer. We're like, what's the thing that's going to be great? What do we need to build to make that happen? And what's a great fun engineering challenge is scaling a service that has lots of users because you made something good. That's a better challenge than like figuring out some really cool, deep technological problem and then realizing that you didn't make something that right, anybody cares about.
And the tech problems are going to come with scale, naturally.
And now we get to do all that stuff. Yeah. Now we're building like crazy machine learning stuff for our recommendation engine, and we're doing AI video editing for our video platform, and we've got an app, and it's wonderful, and we get to do all that stuff. But we get there by like not focusing on what's a sexy technology. You focus on what's a sexy product to build, and then how are we going to like let ourselves move very fast to do that. I'll tell one anecdote because I think this is a pretty technical crowd. There was a thing early on that I originally started building Substack in Python on App Engine, and because I don't know why, that was the thing I happened to know at the time. And turned out the first newsletter was Bill Bishop. He writes a lot in Chinese because it's a newsletter about China. He speaks Chinese. And at the time, App Engine only supported Python 2, and getting the Chinese characters to work in the strings made me so mad that one weekend I deleted the whole code base and started again in Node.js because I just couldn't be fucked to figure out how to make Python strings work or how to like learn Docker so I could use Python 3. And now the entire code base of Substack is JavaScript and Node, which, by the way, turned out to have been a wonderful idea in retrospect. And it was all because I just, like, in a fit of pique, like, couldn't deal with Python strings one weekend.
And that's how technology decisions are made, folks.
Yeah, there you go. It's not always brilliantly thought through.
Yeah. And by the way, actually, I wanted to build on one point that you mentioned about kind of like the open internet, right? Because I think it is I think a very interesting argument that we're so used to the internet being just this, place where you can publish anything and anything can happen. And I think you could make the argument that actually it's a fluke, right? Because prior to the internet, the primary platform was, Microsoft Windows, and a little bit, Macintosh and Amiga and like all these other things. But, Microsoft was a closed system. And Microsoft did a lot of things with their power that caused them eventually to be, sued by the DOJ, and, they became a convicted monopolist and all those things. And then the internet was open. And then mobile is really a duopoly, of two companies. And then this new thing that we're creating, right now on top of it, which is all the AI things, you're like, well, is this going to be a couple really wealthy companies, or is this going to be something that can be open again, right? And so one thing that always, I think with the Substack team that I always admired, and something that got me excited about the company beyond just, the business being great. And actually, maybe I'll tell you a little bit about also the first time I rethought about Substack, with my VC hat on, is that like the mission is actually so amazing. And you guys have such a, strong philosophy beyond actually this as like an amazing business model for people. So anyway, I just wanted to call that out, that this is something that, we all have to actually care about and actually fight for in order for this openness to exist. So yeah, so the thing I was going to mention, and maybe we'll dive deeper into like more recent Substack, but the reason why Substack came up again was that one of my other partners was actually in New York. This was, again, years back when we originally did the investment. So this would have been like, 2019 or something like that. And he was meeting with a bunch of the media companies, and he said that the media companies were just, this was in the boardroom being discussed, that they were very upset that their journalists were quitting and starting Substacks. Right. And I was like,
what a coincidence that we had such critical coverage from them around that time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You would have thought that they would love you. But anyway, so that's how it came up again. And I was like, oh yeah, like there was that thing that Hamish pitched me that I said, no fucking way, and I should maybe talk to him again. Anyway, so that's how it came back. But in more recent kind of Substack history, say a little bit about, a couple things, which is, you've gotten to a point where there's actually been real scale. And I think you guys have maybe announced a couple public numbers, and maybe you can, share that with the group here so that people have a sense of the scale of the business. But now there's real scale. There is a mobile app that's like, going big time. Talk about like, what are you excited about from a technology standpoint? Now that you have hit that scale, and presumably you're not, coding and making all the tech decisions these days.
Yeah, no, I haven't. Funnily enough, I'm still like one of the top 3 contributors to the code base, even though I haven't done anything useful in 3 years or something. Yeah, so I mean, we're over 3 million paid subscribers. We have tens of millions of active users. Some of the people who write on Substack are among the most read columnists in the U.S. on politics and a bunch of different topics. I think there's an increasing sort of cultural footprint and intellectual footprint that runs even ahead of the economic footprint. It's easy to see ideas that started on Substacks, like making their way into the traditional media and the rest of the media. You can kind of like see that thing happen in real time. And there's a lot of frontiers of Substack that are very exciting to me, because at its core, Substack is not about any one. It's not about just email. It's not about just writing. It's not the center of it is this business model. It's this Promethean idea that as a writer, as somebody who's making culture, you should own your connection with your audience. You should have creative freedom. You should get the editorial independence. You should get to do the thing you want, and you should be able to make money, and potentially a lot of money. Like if you can make a living or a fortune making something that people deeply value, the magic of that is not just like, oh, I can do the same thing that I could do anywhere else and like make some more money from it, although that's nice. The magic of that is the kind of stuff you can make gets better. And then the opportunity that creates for us is now there's this whole universe of really differentiated stuff on Substack. And you can get the Substack app and read all the things that you're subscribed to and have like a wonderful experience for that. And also discover everything else in that universe. And then that thing adds, of course, to the network value for all the creators who are there, all the writers who are there. So we're kind of, and it's become possible to build like a very fancy, like everything that you would need for like a full first-class destination on the internet. You can do like machine learning recommendations. You can do all of this stuff that you used to have like a team of like 100 really smart people to make. You now need a team of like, 4 really smart people to make. We have those people at Substack and they're getting to like make this entire new universe of media on the internet with these like sci-fi amazing tools kind of from scratch that tons of people are reading and are making their favorite writers filthy rich. That's cool as hell. Another thing we're doing is expanding into audio podcasts, into video. We have people launching video native stuff. We're at the forefront of all, like we're using all these AI tools where you can like automatically edit. You can like find a clip, you can transcribe and another transcription. There's all of these things that are giving people tremendous new creative leverage that make things that never, like you never could have made before, suddenly become possible into a world where now we have a way to distribute that. Now we have a way to make money from that. It's a very exciting time to be working on it.
Makes sense. And this is something we're constantly examining in these industries that are being disrupted. And I think we can safely say that, the newspaper, journalism, media, books, like all that stuff is being disrupted in a big way. How do you think that your engineering and technology, background and training changes the way that you maybe run Substack versus somebody that maybe is from, like media world? And how might you be approaching things differently?
Oh man.
Chris is going to try really hard not to insult people.
People from media world are very important and good, and they have lots of value to bring society. I do think being a proper technology company is a different species of thing. That's what I'll say. I think if you are thinking about the problem through the lens of somebody is making a media company, you would be missing the fundamental. You'd be missing the point. You'd be missing like the whole ball game, the whole revolution that's happening. And the thing that happens in tandem is technology changes what's possible, and then you get to figure out what the implications of that are and build something that actually works and actually creates like a framework where, 1 million new media companies can be born is just a fundamentally different kind of a problem, I would say, than like, how do we make a good media company? And we do have some of like, in my estimation, some of the most exciting new media companies in the country built on Substack.
We touched a little bit on AI a second ago, and obviously one of the most interesting and compelling use cases for everything that's happening in UI is creativity and being able to edit and all that other stuff. Say a little bit about what you think, how it might play a role in the product, and then to the extent that you're skeptical about any roles that it might play, meaning ways you don't think people want to consume content, or ways that maybe tools won't be useful. Tell us that too.
So I think I'm a big AI bull in general. Like I think we are in the early phases of the most important technological revolution of my lifetime. I think there's going to be, as with any new technology, there's like a hype cycle and a reality cycle, and those two things don't always match up and they don't always have a predictable pattern. That's all true. But like, I've seen enough. This thing is going to change everything. And the way that we think about it I said it before a little bit, is like creative leverage. I think what's going to happen is that the cost of creating content, of like all of the part of like where things are fussy, when I need to produce things, when I need to like do work, when I used to have a big team that had to like realize this creative vision, the cost of doing that thing is going to plummet to zero. And you're going to have kind of like a massive supply of content of every kind that you could ever want. By the way, that's not a new trend. That's just a continuation of a trend that we've already been in. We already, even before AI, we had more content than we could ever want in the whole universe. And the reason that people subscribe to a Substack is not, oh, gee, I don't have enough emails to read and I wish I could pay money to get some more. The problem you have in a world of abundant content is like, how do I allocate my scarce attention, right? Given that I only have so many, you know what AI has not given us yet is more seconds to be alive. And so how am I going to spend my time and my life? How am I going to, what kinds of things do I want to put in my mind? If what I read is what I become, who do I trust for that? What is the point of this culture that I'm consuming? That stuff, it gets to like really interesting philosophical territory. But my answer to all of this is you're still going to care what other people think. You're still going to want to have a connection to the human culture and human society that you're a part of. You're going to want to not just consume that, but you're going to want to act back upon it. But then all of the tools that make that stuff are going to get so much better, right? You're going to be able to like have two people write and make a feature film by themselves that's better than anything that could have existed before, or whatever the new format that replaces the feature film will be. You're going to have people that can sit there on their phone and just talk to each other and have it turn into the best TV show or the best series of clips or the best essay if you wanted to. You're going to have weird things where like you write a science paper and it turns into a podcast. Like, I don't think we can predict exactly how it's all going to bounce, but the like cost of creating really high production value, slick, well done, whatever you want from it, content is going to drop. I actually think that's not only not going to lessen, it's going to increase the value of your trusted relationships, the things that you really care about. So I'm pretty big. Like some people are like, oh man, nobody's going to like need any human media anymore with AI. And I kind of think it's like understood correctly. It's maybe the reverse. Can I say one more AI thing that might be relevant to this?
Please, yeah.
So people always talk about like, how is AI going to impact Substack, the product, and what are we building? There's a bunch of interesting stuff there we've talked about. It's all creative tools. It's all that stuff. The thing that I think is maybe less thought about, but just as important to us, is how is AI changing like making a company? Because my view on this is, I think there's going to be like a great extinction event, where there's sort of like a pre-AI world and a post-AI world, and companies that are getting started now are going to like be native adopters of all of the things that change as that happens, and that happens pretty quickly. And companies that came before, by default, are going to die, I think, because you'll just by force of habit, you'll keep doing the old thing. And unless you're willing to like remake yourself pretty substantially, you're going to get lapped by new entrants that are using these tools natively. And so we're pretty obsessed at Substack of like avoiding that fate by like being constant early testers, early adopters. I think of it as like testing the fences, because at any given moment, there's like hype about 20 different things in AI that's like, oh, everyone's going to be doing this now. And like 19 times out of 20, it's like, it's not there yet. It's bullshit. People are getting hyped about something and it's like, you can do a cool demo, but it's not real. But then 1 in 20 times, it's fucking real. And we cannot afford to miss the 1 in 20 times. We got to be like we have a Slack channel called Model Behavior, where we're just kind of like constantly talking about like, is this possible now? Does this work now? Like, can it write tests for us? Can it do this? Can it handle our customer support? Turns out, yes, it can. And I think that's true in our careers too. Like, I think this is true if you're like a more senior engineer. It's very tempting to feel like, oh yeah, I played around with Copilot. It's not that good. But whatever. I'm not even faster with it. I'm not going to, this is all fake. It's not going to be fake. You got to test the fences.
Well, and just to add to your point about companies, two things on it is I think it's absolutely true that we can now really conceive of using LLMs to like write essays and ultimately books. I think that's that's like a linear extrapolation on what's going to happen. We often talk about, it's like, the two people that get together, they make a Marvel, movie. Today it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Tomorrow it's, something that you can do just on a laptop. And same with video games and so on. But I very much agree that companies themselves are almost like a format, and how do you run something that feels like a 1,000-person enterprise, but like by yourself on a lot. I mean, that's a very interesting, vision in this. And it's absolutely true that we don't know how companies are going to be organized. And in fact, these things have changed a lot. I mean, if you go back to, pre-industrial revolution, I mean, every business was basically a family business. Every business, you had like the blacksmith, and like you teach that to your kids, and it was all based on like the labor of your family. Then factories were very different, and then even the concept of like a limited liability corporation had to be invented, and so on and so forth. And so, one of the things we often talk about is, in the future, do we even know what the job titles are going to be? Do we even know what? And I think it's very hard to extrapolate. So it's cool that you're leaning into all this.
Yeah. And I go back to the thing I said before, right? Like if the thing you're doing is starting with the value in the world that you're making and working backwards to like, how do we do that thing? And you're good at that, and you're focusing on that, and you're willing to like shift up how you do that as you learn new things, I think this whole thing is going to be a huge win for you. It's only going to make the people doing that more powerful, more effective. We're going to have such wealth and abundance that gets created. And you just have to be willing to use whatever tool becomes available to make great things.
Yeah. What do you think of the idea of, do you think people want to subscribe to and follow like fully AI content creators? Or do you think that it matters that there's always a human in the loop for that like authenticity aspect of it? Because one interesting point that you made earlier is, why do people subscribe to Substacks, right? And it's not access to information. I totally agree. A lot of it is, it's a desire to support and sort of, it's almost like a altruistic like drive, and that may be something that you don't feel the same need for maybe when it's an AI. Like what do you think?
We're in danger of getting into like stone freshman dorm room philosophy session, which I'm very willing to do.
That's why we're here.
That's why we're here. I'm not gonna say anything's not gonna happen. Like, I have enough epistemic humility, and I've been surprised enough times by things that have happened that I'm not gonna say this is not gonna happen or that's not gonna happen. When I try to think about this kind of from first principles, the thing I come back to is like, what is the point of culture? Like, what are we doing here? What do I want from Substack? What do I want from like whatever thing I'm using to experience the internet and like put media? What's the point of media? Like, why do I consume media? And I do think one answer is basically like solely for its effect on me, right? Like, I use media like a drug. It's like I watch this thing and I feel good, and like that's what I get from it. And I think, and that's always going to be part of it. And I think AI is going to be able to do that really, really well. I think it's going to be like, science fiction wire heading. Like, we already have things that are like this. There's already people that treat TikTok this way, where you just kind of like, switch your brain off, or reality TV or any kind of thing. There's sort of like I use media like a drug. It just has an effect on me. It's just kind of like giving me a feeling, making me forget the world. That will happen. There'll be big businesses built on that. That's one of the real motivation. It's giving me what I want. But the other point of media to me is learning what I should want. It's being part of a wider society of like trying to figure out like who I want to become. Am I like becoming more like the person that I think I should be? Am I understanding the purpose of my life? Am I getting to contribute back positively? Am I connecting with other people who I can like live in society with? I basically think both of these things are going to be like enormous businesses, and we're building the second one.
We're almost wrapping up here. Tell us about kind of the next chapter of Substack. What are you the most excited about? What do you think is going to be kind of, as now that you have scale, and, and frankly, I mean, this is one of the really interesting things about kind of Kick and, Substack is that, Substack is really kind of like an N of one company. I mean, it's really like a unique company in the market. It's a company that everyone knows about, right? And it sort of become the home of smart people on the internet, which is fantastic. And so what now that you have that like momentum going, like what is the next chapter? What are you the most excited about?
I think there's probably 3 related things that we're working on right now that I think are going to change what's possible. The first is the Substack app and destination. Like you sort of asked, like, why did we never build an app? It's like, well, we couldn't at the start. Turns out we can now. And there is a place, we kind of want to be like the first class place on the internet where you can go and have a real direct relationship with the people that are making the things you deeply value. And like, that economic engine kind of works. If you don't have the Substack app yet, you should get it. It's good. That thing's really starting to work. And then that enables some other things, right? It enables the multimedia stuff. We're getting into podcasting. We're pretty deep into podcasting now. Video is starting to really take off. The fact that this model doesn't only work for writers, but it also works for all kinds of creators who are starting to have the same kind of complaints. A lot of people feel about Instagram today like writers felt about the New York Times in 2019. I don't have enough control over this thing. I'm not getting to make the thing that I actually want. I'm not making as much money as I wish I could from this. There's a whole sort of like class of creative people beyond exclusively writers who are kind of like starting to discover Substack in weird and wonderful ways that I never would have predicted. There's a thriving like fashion scene on Substack, which could not have been further from Hamish and my original, network that we were making. And then related to those 2 things, the last thing is just like making it radically easier for the next generation of creators. And so it used to be that if you wanted to start a Substack, you had to go to substack.com and start a publication and fill out your thing and set up your website. And that was 10 times easier than whatever else you could have done to make that same thing before. But it's still pretty hard. And as of within the last month, we've made it possible where you can just pull out the app and like publish something. And we've already had people who like pulled out the app and published something, and then like 3 weeks later they're making like $50K, and they're like, "Ooh, this is very interesting." And I think you tie that into the video stuff, you tie that into all this AI stuff. I think we're going to live in a world where like I can like talk to my phone, and if the things I say are important enough, smart enough, good enough, I can get famous. I can make $1 million. I can like every other thing that I would have had to worry about besides making something great, I don't have to worry about anymore. And that's going to dramatically increase the amount of great culture we have.
Last question for you, Chris, on this, which is one of my favorite things about Substack when I talk to people about it, is Substack is one of those products where people will literally come up and tell me, this has changed my life. Especially for creators, right? And it's because they often have, some kind of job, and then they start a Substack, and then literally Substack like makes them into millionaires. I mean, it'll change your life. And so I'd love to maybe close on maybe an anecdote or something, like a very interesting creator's experience, like what they were doing before. Like what happened, like, something, I know you have a lot of creators, so.
There's one person in particular that kind of jumps to mind who I won't say who it is.
Yeah. Don't say who it is. Yeah. Don't use any numbers, but just,
it's related to the thing I just said. It was somebody who I've had this experience a few times where early, and you had this with Lenny, I think, and I convinced him, you got him to start and I got him to turn on page descriptions, but there's like this early period where like a butterfly could have flapped its wings and they wouldn't have started a Substack, right? It's like at the very beginning, it's like, I'm not even a writer. I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I have anything worthwhile to do. I don't know if I can do it. And sometimes you get to like, just give a little like push. And so there's this one woman who told us after the fact that she couldn't figure out how to work our stupid website to start a Substack, to the point where she actually paid someone else to like set up her Substack for her. And then started. And
this is a direct critique of Chris's UI ability.
Oh man. Yeah. Well, listen, we're making it easier. And then she went on to make over $1 million a year on Substack, to the point where, her husband was able to like quit his job and spend time with the family. And it kind of like completely transformed their life. And she's like doing the kind of work she really believes in. And the part of it, these stories are the things that are the most motivating to me. And part of the reason is for her sake, because it's changed her life. She's giving something to the world that otherwise never would have existed, and getting to like have all these benefits, and her audience loves it. They're loving it enough to pay for it. It's making their lives better. But it's also sort of like, what about the people who the butterfly flapped its wings the other way? Like, in a world without Substack, does Lenny Rachitsky just get another job as a product manager? Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe not.
Yeah.
He's a pretty sharp guy, but like, there's so many people that have something very valuable to give the world if they had a way to kind of like make culture and have a real business model for it. And the more that we can like take this kind of Promethean act of giving them the power to do that, making it radically easy, especially at the beginning, the amount of stuff that can get created is the reason we exist.
Amazing. Well, Chris, you have built with the team one of the most important companies in the world right now. I'm so happy to be a part of it, part of the journey. Let's please give Chris a hand.
Thank you.